We're live, episode 109 of the Lyrical Ones podcast. I am Cineo, joined as always and ever. Fluent, how are you doing this evening?
I'm living in a space of gratitude, Senio. Happy Wednesday. Uh, it's going to be a great wrap up to a beautiful day. And I think whatever chaos is happening outside of this space, um, I feel peace being here right now in this exchange. And, uh, I think that's probably the difference between happiness and peace is that, you know, you, you flip a game, you complete a game, you find a secret or Easter egg, um, and it's good for a time, but peace you can take with you. Um, and so I think whatever peace y'all bring to me today, I'm gonna keep it all week. So thank you for having me again. And we got a guest.
We definitely do. We have a guest. Guest, please let people know who are you, your name, what are you doing, and what brought you here to Lyrical Ones?
Hey, everybody. Nice to meet you both and be able to speak
Hey,
up. My name is Cheryl, and I am an artificial intelligence researcher. And I found out about Lyrical through Dave Gibbons, actually, who I heard was on the show. Um, and I met Christian, and he seems super cool, and his wife. And yeah, we were just talking. There's just, when you have a good vibe and you just know like you get along. Like I felt like I really connect with what's going on. I liked what Christian had said, something about the post-Christian, no pun intended, world, and I was like, I don't know. When I heard that, I was like, I had this feeling of like not knowing where I would end up. And I was like, I feel like whatever that is, whatever that movement is, like, I feel like I could maybe head in that direction. And it was the first time you felt like that there are people thinking ahead, not just people in the moment, but people thinking ahead. So I really like that. And then I was like, I do this thing called Passion Talks. You can check it out, passiontalks.org. But I invited, I was like, Christian, you got to get your people at our event, and we're doing this thing called a poster session where everyone posts their story up. And I was like, we got to get your community and connect with my community and see what happens.
oh yeah, I'm all about that. I'm down.
Definitely, definitely down. Passion Talk. So is passiontalks.org?
Yeah, passiontalks.org. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Nice.
And so, with that being said, Cheryl, I mean, how are you doing today? How has your day been going? How's your week been going?
Oh man, I mean, I feel like July is kind of like the holidays of the summer, right? Like it's kind of like where people are taking off, and but also feel like it's been wave after wave of stuff that you don't even know what you're coming back to. You take off, you don't even know what you're going to come back to. So there's been a little bit of that, but also like just in that time of uncertainty, I felt like this year is like a year where you just got to make stuff. You just got to keep making things and seeing where it lands. Because there's just so much of the old is passing away. And you got to have the new thing come in place of the old. And so those who are able, I mean, and it's a privilege to even be able to be in a place where you're not just trying to keep yourself going each day, but like to have a little extra to overflow into. You got to be making and planning new stuff. And so this upcoming this one we just found out today that we had this project, this DEI jazz initiative, and it's gonna get signed off on. So I'm on the board of the Monterey Jazz Festival as well.
Bars.
Clint Eastwood is on that board. It's the longest continuous running jazz fest in Monterey,
That's right.
and I get to like be part of this amazing cultural historical event, but also we're like, we gotta not just be about, the famous people, but how do we tell the story moving forward? How do we pour into the arts? And so we were doing some DEI initiative, working with getting HBCUs represented at the Jazz Fest, and I think the person said I'm gonna sign that tomorrow, and so
Oh dang.
like let's like. But if it goes off, it's gonna be really great. We're kicking off the very first, because we were like, what are the roots of jazz music? Well, there's so many, but one of the main ones is church music and gospel music, and the Black church community. Basically, even today, to this day, the best
To this
musicians in
day.
the world. The best musicians in the world grew up playing in the church. You're not going to find them necessarily. They didn't go to the prep schools that sent all their kids to Juilliard or whatever. It was like they grew up playing in the church. And so we said, let's get the Morgan State Gospel Choir. Let's get the Texas Southern Gospel Choir up there, and like let's paint the full picture. And not because what ends up happening is it gets appropriated and then it becomes expensive, and then they cater to like I'm not saying this is what the Monterey Jazz Fest does, but as things do take on a new a new form, like it ends up catering towards like white audiences.
Right.
And so we
We
can't forget where it comes from.
Nah, not at all. Like we have definitely witnessed the phenomenon of co-op and dilute in the last few years, with a lot of different movements of resistance and positivity. From We see it happening with body shaming. We see it happen with uh, police brutality, opposing police brutality, opposing violence against Asians. We see You see it happen with Black Lives Matter. You see organizations, corporations, right, co-op something, co-op a movement, and then dilute it to like a simmer.
Yeah. And you see like when you see the crowds going to jazz, you see that they're getting older. Like it's not bringing in the people like Coachella brings in the people. And we saw what happened to the other festivals, right? Like New Orleans Jazz Festival. I was just there like a couple years ago. It was Katy Perry was the headliner of the New Orleans Jazz Festival. I mean, it's more for some people it's more about the New Orleans food than it is about the jazz. And so
Right.
it's getting diluted, like you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Nah, because I grew up listening to like Ornette Coleman, and then seeing Wynton Marsalis come out, come into like his own. I grew up playing trombone, but my siblings uh, played music. My younger brother played trumpet. My sister played drums and bass guitar. My older brother played sax. Did you play any instruments?
Yeah, I'm a sax player, but I did
Hey,
some percussion and sax is kind of like where I'm at, and I
oh,
sing.
nice.
Maybe I'll sing sometimes, but yeah, like I was like, it sounds like the Marsalis family, like as your family's got like all the whole band there.
Yeah, we just have vibes. My late dad played a lot of Stevie Wonder, and then like composers like Quincy Jones and Barry White, and so we got to hear a lot, and got to my favorite period of music is from 68 to like 82,
Wow, yeah,
and so I had to keep 68 in there because like Summer Madness is like my favorite song of all time by Kool and the Gang. And Bobby McFerrin lives out here in the Bay Area.
yeah,
uh, um, and then like I had to get 82 in there because Off the Wall is like one of my albums, that I love from Michael Jackson. And like Thriller's great and everything, but Off the Wall, is like just like ahead of its time in a way.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. No, I
and
like you probably like one of my favorite sax players is Maceo Parker.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
Maceo, James
yeah,
Brown,
yeah.
James, man,
Like I was like, I remember sitting front row. I could see his sweat. Like he was just like his sweat was probably flying off into my area. Like
nice,
I just saw him. I always wanted to sit up close. I wanted to see the expression, like see how their facial expressions were. But yeah, mine was Sonny Rollins. Like my
nice,
favorite. I remember thinking like he's still alive, but he's got to be so old. Like if I don't see him now, I'm never gonna see him. Here's my chance. That was in 2007, and so that at that point that was the 50th Monterey Jazz Festival. Because I had just moved over I was from the East Coast. I just moved over to the West Coast, and and I saw that Sonny Rollins was just. I was in Santa Cruz, and I was like, Monterey's not that far. This might be my like one and only chance to see him. I didn't have any money though. I took the bus down. I was a volunteers, but like after I was done collecting tickets, I was like I still couldn't see him because he was on the big stage and I didn't have access. And I somehow got onto the crew, the backstage crew that worked with the press, and I got to like shake Sonny Rollins' hand. I got his autograph. I got to tell him that I loved his music, that he was an influential person in my life. And and that was in 2007. Fast forward to this year, 2022. This year they asked me to be on the board
Hey,
of the
this
Monterey.
year, that's this year. That's a new
That
thing.
happened. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hey,
They
congratulations.
yeah, like it was just one of those things like you follow your passion. And I would
Yeah.
just go, I went year after year after year, and I would kept having ideas like, we need to do more. Like they were already thinking along those lines. They're like, we need to give back. They're recruiting from like oftentimes they have these scholarship bands like the next gen. And it's like they're taken from these like prep schools, and all the students end up being like not people of color. Like it's just all white like jazz bands, and they're like, we need to go to the churches. Like they're like,
Yeah.
we need to find the musicians that we're looking for aren't at the prep schools. And so they've already had that mindset. And so we were like, let's see how we can help, let's see how we could take it up a level.
So Cheryl, growing up on the East Coast, how did you get introduced to jazz? How did it become a thing for you?
I've always had a thing for, I always loved music, like not to be, I know it's everyone's story, but I like, high school, I was like writing poetry, like I know you
Yeah,
all are, like legit.
you family here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You guys get it. I was like, and the reason I wrote poetry was because I felt like I couldn't find the words to say the thing I wanted. Like no one could understand what I was trying to get at, and so it might as well be poetry.
I still can't give straight answers to folks.
Yeah, and no, and I was the person like if you ask me how I'm doing, I was like, how can you ask me that question? And then people would say, "Girl, it's not that deep," and I'm like, "But what if
It's
it is?
always that deep.
What if it is?" I was
Exactly.
like, yeah, I hear you. Like, but yeah, like so with same thing with music. I remember like, we didn't have we had, any music program is a good music program these days.
Mm,
But I remember like no one in the band wanted to take the solo. Because usually it's like they have the one where you write it. They have in the big bands, they usually have like a solo in the folder that's like just
right,
play
right.
with in there. It's like a copy off of like whoever, right? Like Jerry Mulligan's Barry solo, like just transcribed on there. And then like I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna solo. I better take the lead because they didn't teach us how to improvise. And I remember that moment where I just like I thought about it. I even like wrote out some ideas. And then I remember the first time you're playing the notes that aren't on the page. And I felt like something inside me come alive. Like it was like there was something more to me that I didn't even have the language to express. And at that moment, it was just nothing but jazz. I went through a period of time where it was just like nothing but jazz. It was back in the Napster days,
Oh
the whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like
I still got MP3s.
yeah,
I still got files.
anything I could get my hands on. I was like Charlie Parker, everything. Dizzy
Yep.
Gillespie, of course, Miles Davis, like pulled everything from there. Even all the way back to Sonny Stitt, Lester Young, and of course I have a thing for saxophones, so I was always listening for those. But yeah, it was like love at first sight. I think like once you take that plunge and you're not just like a lot of places they just teach you to read the notes on the page. And once I was able to not do that, I was like, oh man, there's so much more that I don't even think in this lifetime I'm gonna develop the vocabulary to be able to scratch the surface.
I,
But I love
I
it. Yeah,
I think
yeah,
the vocabulary, right? I think you only describe jazz with jazz,
yeah, 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 yeah.
right? That's the amazing thing about it. It's like it's self-contained in that way. Like you could write an R&B song about jazz, but it wouldn't capture jazz, right? You could write any song, right? But if it's not jazz, it's not going to communicate what jazz is, at any point. So now, question: how do you think what you do in your research, AI research, artificial intelligence research, and
Yeah.
jazz correlate?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that what jazz was for me was an understanding of what it meant to be a human in a way
Mm,
that no one had ever explained it to me before. It's what it means to be human and how I could be better at that. Like, how do I get closer and closer to that design of like what I'm meant to be doing? I think the same thing about technology. Technology is about understanding what it means to be human and how we can be better than that. And if it's not, right, technology can also just become a way to figure out how to have more power and how to get more power and how to put the chains on people and how you can control the masses. And it can achieve other ends. That's why like the human centeredness is such a big component there. But I did get to work on a machine learning for creativity and music project. Is a project called Magenta. You go to g.co/magenta, and I got to work on that team for a little bit, and we were looking at like ways that machines can help artists. We have a paper out about it actually, where we were trying to figure out how we could take the intuitions that machines are able to learn from humans to make the music creation experience more of what the human wants. We're
that's
not
right.
saying we're trying to create AI to replace the human. And I could see how someone could frame it that way. And I could see how people could be trying to do that. But that's not what we were trying to do. We're trying to figure out how as the art form changes, as we're able to get new tools. Like, I mean, back in the day, one of the first instruments I've seen was like a flute that they made out of a bone. There's like a bone flute. It's like a
Right, right.
thick flute.
Yep.
They said it predates the bowl. Like that flute exists before the bowl. So they say music is older than soup, is what I heard someone say. But these instruments come in and they create new art forms. They create like the distortion on the guitar, for example, right? Is a
Right.
new way it was seen as a flaw. It was seen as something you didn't want. But then Jimi Hendrix was like, no, I'm gonna use it. Like
Yeah.
it totally changes the way we understand art. It creates new palettes, it creates new canvases. And so that's what we're trying to understand with technology. And not in a way where it's like only a few people get to do that, but how do we bring society along with us in that? So yeah, it's like definitely in the space of like my research was always when I was in school was on storytelling, like so more about like narrative and language, but I also got to do some stuff with music as well.
Yeah. And I think that's a very right human characteristic of storytelling, right? It's kind of what makes us, for me, I feel like that's what it meant to be created in God's image, was that I could create. And right, a blade of grass is going to do one thing, right? A tree is going to do its thing, right? Even a beaver who can create is going to create a dam. And as a human, not only can I create, I can write a book, I can make a tote bag, I could make a sweatshirt, and all of those things can tell my story. And I think like what you said about like create, we have to keep creating things, um, reminded me that like Cineo right now is in this space of creating a song a day, um, which is mind blowing to me, because of my lifestyle right now, the bandwidth is not, the time is not allotted for it. Um, and so that he's taking on this aspect of creationism in this way is like, right? I think you're right. It's like the old things are passing away, and like, how do we keep going forward? And when you do get a new tool, just like when you get a new video game, right? You are experiencing something different, or you experience a new fighting system in a video game, right? You're experiencing something different, or you get to a new, right? A new sandbox open world experience, right? You are, the story's being told differently, right? It's not linear necessarily anymore. Um, and you're creating something different. It sounds different. It feels different. And if it feels different, right, it's a different experience right, for a humanity, right, for a human to go through, right? Even if we're walking on the same path, if I'm on the left and on you're on the right, you'll see different trees than I see, right? You'll see them at a different angle, right? You see different squirrels than I see different flowers than I see, even though we're on the same road. And right, as long as we keep doing that and experience creating, right, we are interpreting what's happening in our lives, right, more and more, instead of right leaving them, suppressed.
Yeah, I mean that's the problem with the silos and the echo chambers, is that everyone thinks there's just this one way to experience the world. Like they
Yes.
just think it's this one way. And like I remember an interesting game I came across through the serious games genre was the one called Peacekeeper, and it was like made by this person in the Middle East, and he said I wanted a game to that enacted diplomacy between Israel and Palestine. And it
Whoa.
was like, and he was just like, and like, there's just it's just such a powerful medium. There's another one. I work for Brenda Romero. I don't know if you know John Romero, the Doom guy, right?
Yeah.
Um, John Romero and Brenda Romero are like, kind of the matriarchs of the game industry. But Brenda created this incredible game called Train. I don't know if y'all heard of Train. Uh,
uh
it was a board game, and you can't really play it. Like, it's a board game, and like I'll just set it up for you.
Go
Uh,
ahead.
and so so you are basically a train driver, and the whole game is you're driving people from one side to the other side. And it's interesting, you get these cards and it'll tell you got to go pick these people up. I mean, the setting is really interesting too. There's like broken glass everywhere. It looks like a little bit war torn. And then what ends up happening is partway through the games, no one's ever finished the game before. Usually halfway through the game, people just get up and say, I'm not playing anymore. And can you imagine what's going on there? Because
Yeah.
one of the cards you pull eventually says you're in Auschwitz right now. And these people that have been playing this game, just carting people from one side of the board to the other side, are just like appalled at what they were actually doing. And the whole point of
Right.
that game was to kind of put you in that mindset of like, what do you know? And then when I've taught artificial intelligence and game design all over the world. And one thing I always ask the students, I try to set up kind of a scenario like that. I tell them about the story. I'm like, what trains are we driving today? That like if we pull that card that says you're in Auschwitz right now, we're gonna be like, I can't believe I played it as long as I did. Like what trains are we driving? And the
Uh,
kids, they come up with all sorts of creative answers. Like my favorite one is they're like, oh man, my iPhone. Like I keep buying like my iPhone. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know like what blood, sweat, and tears actually go into getting that to me.
that's right.
So yeah, no, games is so powerful. Games are
Yeah.
so powerful. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there was so much to kind of dig deep on, right? Like just exploring the concept of what is America's gift to the world, right? And jazz music is one of them. It was one of the things in the past when going through what does America have to offer the world in the process of discovery as they went all over the United States, they found that the music was the most original thing that the United States had, right? And when you break down the dynamics of jazz and what is a euphemism of or a play on words of, and also where it was born out of, right? This mix of you have the European kind of scale of music, you have the Middle Eastern scale of music, and then you have the African scale of music, and how they merged and converged together with the clave through slavery, through church, to become this thing that is jazz, right? There's brass band, there's second line music, there's all these things that come together or come out of what jazz is, and the evolution of blues and R&B and rock and roll and rap and dance music. These concepts come from something that, yeah, like the motto of the American music industry is, black people make it and white people take it. And it happens time and time again, and jazz is kind of like one of the first moments where you start to understand that concept, where you start to see how that happens and how jazz dives into what is the innate instinctual feelings that you have about the music, right? The dissonance, the tension, the improvisation, then the resolve and the ability to display, who you are, right? How you show up, how you are not just playing along, but how you choose to communicate to everyone around you through your ability and your skill set, right? And so jazz in a lot of ways, to think about artificial intelligence and think about what does it mean to understand the thought process of a person and how they create and how they develop and how they make. But then at the same time, how do they create the dissonance, the tension, the conflict, and then the resolve to create the next thing or to get to the next piece or the next place? And yeah, looking at the game train, right? It's like one thing that people forget is even though you're given the game and the rule set, that doesn't mean that you can't break them, right? That's the thing that people often forget a lot of times because they become so accustomed to this is the way, right? And jazz in a lot of ways does away with what are the rules, right? It's like we're gonna go off feeling, right? This is the key we come back to, but that isn't the key you have to stay in. And for a lot of people, that was a very jarring experience. It was considered low life music, right? Just how hip hop has been brutalized in media, that's the same thing that jazz went through, right? It was considered low quality, low grade music. But when they explored the United States, they said that is what's most original about your country is your music, right? So to think of that and how quick people will scoff at and belittle and minimize, and now they treasure it. They the oftentimes when they do the jazz festivals or jazz appreciation nights at the symphonies, it's gonna be a high scale, high class, high ticket event, and it comes from this this need of expression, this need for communication, this need for identity and to be seen. And in a lot of ways, all those things tie into the fabric of just who we are as people, just in terms of our day-to-day ebb and flow, just in terms of how we are. And so yeah, like knowing that you were able to find your way, find yourself, create bits and pieces of who you are, right? Like you kind of have an idea and then you step into those things the more you do it, right? It's like I got an ideas. Now they can hear my ideas. Right now, it went from a conception in my mind to now I'm on the board and I am parallel with these other individuals who people revere or admire, and my voice is being heard in the process. And I'm able to have confirmation that I'm not crazy for my ideas because other people are feeling it too. And me being here gives them more support, right? It not only supports me, but I'm sharing that support with those around me that share the same feelings and the same beliefs. And that's a powerful thing. A lot of people sometimes take for granted is like, I love this thing, but we can often doubt ourselves. We can get our insecurities. We can get the self doubt. We can get the imposter syndrome to prevent ourselves from showing up, to be present, to participate, to help others find their own way and create the space for engagement, to create the space for that equitable moment where someone can be seen, where we can say, okay, we've given more than enough to you. Now let's give it to some others, right? And I think that's a powerful thing, right? It's like, you're talking about games and how games can be powerful, and it's like the convergence of all, to me, I love video games. The convergence of human expression and creativity in every medium is found in video games, in my eyes, right? Whether it's through acting, storytelling, art design, sound design, music, mechanics, physics, you name every aspect of our life now and how it can be flipped on its head in a video game, right? Everything that our personal processing unit can compute, can observe, can receive through electric signals is then morphed and mutated and turned into something else totally out of this world or more lifelike in this you know, artificial realm, right? So it's like these parallels find themselves in many ways that, it's fascinating to see that you've been able to navigate and on this journey of life find how these parallels, at least in my eyes, coexist and find resolve in the manifestation and creation of the things that we do as people. I mean, talking about games, I mean, what were some of the games, the video games that were important to you growing up? What were some of the ones that stood out that, meant more or gave you that moment to step away from everything to be like, okay, I'm diving in this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my Twitter handle is FF Paladin, so I'll give you all a moment to guess what that is about. But no, I mean, it starts with Mario, like it did with so many of us. And you're just you kind of like sucked into it a little bit. Like kind of like there's kind of like this golden era before everyone had computers. Like that was my first computer. Like my first computer program that I interacted with was Mario.
Nice.
And I was just drawn into that world that Mario was in. I was Mario. Um and then, in high school and college we played a lot of StarCraft because that was
Uh,
everyone gets so into it.
Oh,
And
you
I
just had a line of computers in everybody's own.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now you finally have all the computers and the network and like I was a Protoss person. I really like Protoss. And but Going back to the FF Paladin Twitter handle, no, but my obsession was Final Fantasy, and and yeah, shout out to honorable mention to Pokemon too.
Oh,
We all
you.
know the
Oh,
song.
yeah. Like you got a hero up there. You got an icon up there
Yeah,
on your
yeah.
head.
Got to catch them all, like we all know. And honestly, that's how I thought about life. Like that was like what I lessons I learned in video games. Because sometimes the adults aren't gonna dream big enough. They're not gonna have the hope that you have when you play a video game. And Final Fantasy was it for me because um, back then it was like Disney movies, right? Like the princesses. We all know the princesses, and they
Yeah,
were all in some trouble, and then they needed someone to come save them. Back then, I mean, it's different now.
it's different
Uh,
now.
but like the video games I played, Final Fantasy specifically, the women characters had their own thing going on. Like they were showing the male characters what was up, and there's this other thing too of like the worse the situation you found yourself in, the more likely you were going to go and do something about it. The more that you were probably the one that was going to turn it around for everybody. Like if your village burns down, your family's gone, you don't have any friends, you're getting eaten by wolves, and then all of a sudden you find your party along the way. You find your people along the way, and
Yeah,
together you move the mountains.
yeah.
So
You find
yeah,
your purpose,
yeah,
right? In that injustice and what was taken from you.
yeah. And you learn that in video, like that sense that like I'm gonna keep going. Like I like you know how like it's like you at the arcade or whatever. It's like as long as you still have a life left, you're gonna keep trying. Like as long as I haven't run out of lives, I'm just gonna keep going. Um, and so I felt like I internalized, like that's what drove me, and it made me like I wanted to make video games in the same way that when I played jazz or when I listened to jazz, I felt a part of me come alive that other people didn't quite get, but it felt more real to me than anything else anyone else was doing. It was the same thing with video games. It was like I could communicate, like you always saying, like it's like more than just telling you a story or writing a story or even playing a movie for you. It was like I could take you through it. Like you
Yeah,
became Mario.
right.
You were Ash Ketchum, and you were going to Professor Oak to get your Pokédex and and go off on your adventure. That's what it was like for me.
Nice. Are you still playing Pokemon at all now?
I was playing Pokemon Go for a bit, and then now I'm playing Pikmin. The Pikmin Niantic game, I'm so into it. It's like that's like my newest thing. It's just like it's all about walking. Like Pokemon was about geolocation and like getting the Pokemon and whatever landmarks. Pikmin is about walking and like you still collect these Pikmin, but
Right.
I've got like my team. I got all my I got like 12 of my friends started playing because I was like, yo, I need more people in my walking team so
That's
that we
right.
can.
I'm about to be on it too, because I play Pokemon Go. Me and my family we play Pokemon Go, but I
Yeah.
I haven't tried Niantic's Pikmin game yet.
Oh my gosh, it's like we're just like reconnected. It's like you're not with people, but you feel like you're with them, and it's like not even that. It's not even that deep. It's like it really is very superficial. But you feel like you're with them. No, we got to exchange friends codes
Oh
because I
yeah,
want
yeah,
for more people to walk with.
yeah. We on.
Yeah, no, Pikmin is I mean, it's crazy how they've been able to evolve. Games evolve. Games evolve with the times. D- Outside of Pikmin, are there any other games that you're currently playing right now?
Um, I was trying out It Takes Two, which is a really great just like it's just games have just come so far. But I can't wait. I'm waiting. I like people are saying, oh, Final Fantasy is not what it used to be. I was working on the Stadia team when they launched Stadia, and funny enough, when I was in 10th grade, you know how sometimes they're like, oh, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I wrote down that I was going to work on Final Fantasy 15. And then, like, you don't even know how to time these games because it's not like they come out every year. It's like you
Right.
just don't know when they're going to come out. And then Final Fantasy 15 came out, right? And I was like, all right, I'm not obviously not working on it. But no joke, like I was on Stadia and I remember one of their premiere games was Final Fantasy 15. I was like on the team when they like released it. And I
Hey,
I just played the heck out of it. I was just like I like signed up. I got a founder's account, so I don't have the number. You know how you get the number next to your handle. Like I just have my FF Paladin. Like I don't get you don't have any number.
bars.
And I just played the heck out of Final Fantasy 15. And it's just like I don't know, like they just have me, like I don't know the characters and the way they tell their stories. I know it's different than the SNES, NES days, but like they still have me. So that was a game that I really enjoyed.
So you were on the Stadia team. So Stadia. Stadia is, for those that aren't aware, right? Stadia is Google's offering into the video game world, right? Where it's an online subscription based service where you have access to titles and games, and it's kind of it's like the easy and most accessible entry point, right? If you have internet access for video games, right? You don't really have to have like a traditional console where you spend $300 on something, right? Oftentimes you can, if you have a Chrome browser, and there's a Stadia controller as well, you can play games. And it's funny because me and a friend of mine, when Stadia first came out, I have a friend who's like, "It's not gonna work." It's not, and I was like, "This is the beginning of something new. Like you have to try it out, experiment, and see how far the scale can go based off of the times that we're in." And Stadia is definitely something that I had a different vision for, um, in terms of who I think most benefits from having that experience, and how accessible it is, and how that I feel like is a lot of times people just aren't aware. They get so consumed with the big three, they don't realize the other alternatives and options that are out there. And so yeah, Stadia, I had to say my little piece about it just because I remember when they were at the game developers conference in San Francisco, and they had the history of video games on display, and just there was associations being made about what they had on display, and I was like, yeah, y'all just don't understand. Taking chances and taking risks is a big deal. So I just had to say that piece about Stadia. I mean, how was it for you working on Stadia? What was your role? What were your responsibilities working on Stadia?
I was on the R&D side. So we were working on building believable AI that could be used in exclusive content. And then we transitioned from that to actual Google research. So I'm still with a bunch of the same people I was working with on Stadia. But it was incredible just preparing for launch, like seeing all the things going down. Um, I felt it's interesting because when you're working on something that is in the media, is in the press, and you're hearing people talk about it, and you're just like, it's just like it was just. I feel like they didn't quite get like what it was about. Like you said, people were really skeptical, but when you played it, it was like magic. It was like I was like, this is like, imagine you're watching a YouTube video, but all of a sudden you can control the influencer on the screen. That's what Stadia is like, and that's what a lot of the other cloud platforms are like. But that are like now. But Google wanted
Right.
to kind of, because we've been working in cloud for such a long time, and it was there was just like it was just like never what I've imagined. You remember back in the day on the old like Apple machines, you'd be trying to look for like a game, like you get like there's a game called like the Snake Game or whatever. Or, like there's another one. It was called like Nibbles, and then like there's like this one weird game where you were like throwing bananas at buildings. I don't know if you guys remember. There's these like old, and then there was Solitaire, and then all you had was Solitaire, and then it was Minesweeper, and all you had was Solitaire and Minesweeper,
Yeah.
and then now it's like you can play Cyberpunk, this game that just came out, with the same internet you're using to watch like this video that you're watching right now. All of you watching this stream right now,
Right.
you're able to play these games. Like I'm just like, dang, like I hope I like I really I was like Final Fantasy 15 is on there, and there's a bunch of Square games on there. My hope, I was just like checking the news, like, because you don't always get the inside scoop if you're on the platform. I'm like, when's Final Fantasy 7 remake gonna show up? I was just like hoping
Yeah.
like
Right.
that's gonna show up on there. um it's just incredible. It was
Yeah.
incredible to me. Yeah.
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 And I think Stadia pushed the big three to develop their cloud game, right, to another level. If it wasn't for Stadia, Nintendo would have Nintendo Online. If it wasn't for Stadia, Sony wouldn't redid their PlayStation Plus tiers. If it wasn't for Stadia, like Microsoft already had, their thing going, but it wasn't anywhere near what it is today. But they wouldn't have pushed anywhere if Stadia wasn't coming for them.
Yeah, it wouldn't it definitely wouldn't have come out as fast as it was. Like, as soon as Google went out to market, it was like everyone else was like, oh, like you heard it one after the other, and Amazon
Yeah,
was in there, like,
yeah,
yeah. And I feel like game communities, they're just, it's like they're so passionate about games that, like, I felt like Google was just kind of the new kid, and like they didn't quite get it. And Google, I don't know, Google is just like such a big company too. I wish, like, I kind of wish people gave it more of a chance, like when it first came out. Because I feel like I just feel like, I don't know. I feel like the heart of it is in the right place. It's just like it's hard to introduce, like, kind of come into the game when there's all these people are into, like, PlayStation selling out like crazy. Like you gotta wait forever to just get your PlayStation, and then we're introducing a new way to do it.
yeah.
Um,
And
yeah,
people are protective, right, of their safe spaces.
yeah.
And when you say, oh, well, now anybody can come into this space, right, people become right abrasive
Or they don't
and
know. Yeah,
resistant.
they don't
You
know
get
how to.
what?
They don't know if they can trust it. They're
Yeah,
like,
exactly right. Is that?
how
But
much can I trust it? Yeah.
that's the thing, is that, like, to me, I had, I spent a lot of time working in nonprofit, working with youth. And when there's like there's people, and then there's the communities, right? These segmented um kind of subcultures of people who have philosophies, ideologies around everything. Now with video games, right? Going back to what we were saying, one, the funniest thing I remember about the Stadia was, at the time, Sony was like unrelentless in letting people have cross playability, right? To be able to play with people on Xbox. They were like, we're not doing it, we're not going nowhere near it. But then on the back end said, we're going to work with Microsoft to develop our cloud-based structure because of Stadia. Like, they didn't say it in those exact terms, but when you look at the timing of events, that's what happened. And I was like, wow, to the consumer, you will not budge on giving them the ability to play with Xbox. But as soon as you're threatened and you have any sense of fear, that's the first person you turn to develop your technology. How funny. Now, the
Yeah.
other side about Stadia was, in my eyes, I felt like the direction was focused on gamers who were already in the space instead of the gamers who were trying to get into the space. Because I worked with kids who they would tell me how they would like tape their phone to the ceiling to
Hmm.
then tether their other phone to play games. And I was like, that's who Stadia is for. It's for the kid who wants to play games and has like little to no means, and all they're looking for is a controller, right? All they're looking for is that opportunity to just dive in and add a little bit more legitimacy to something that they already love to do, right? And
Yeah.
I think that, yeah, there's so many people who love video games and are so fixated on their affiliation and their, brand identity, if you will, of like, I love Nintendo. They could do no wrong. They could
Yeah.
sell me half the game on a chip and I'll
Yeah.
be happy with it. Versus the kid who's like, struggling to stream a generic version of PUBG, right, that they have on a jailbroken phone, or the kid who's watching Minecraft videos on YouTube all day. Like there's so many of those kids who exist who are just looking for that accessible entry level point to be like, oh, I can now play this. And
Yeah.
it was like Stadia was focused on these gamers who are in a lot of ways so jaded and just almost like the abused mindset of like, I'm gonna stick by my brand no matter what. Whatever they do to me, I'm gonna love them. And it's like, yeah, there's so many other people who don't have a console. There's so many other people who appreciate games, who love games. And so that's what I saw Stadia as, is like that is a entry point for those people. But it was oftentimes looking at the commercials marketed towards the hardcore gamer. And the hardcore gamer is like,
Set in their
that's
ways.
it's just, I mean, that's
Set.
one segment of the whole world.
Yeah.
Like,
It's you're right, and it's like I'm watching some of the streamers, and like I'm like listening to them, like or they'll be like something comes out in the news, and they'll be like, oh, like, and they were just like, I'm like, wow, you guys are hard on Stadia. And then as time went on, they're like, oh, Stadia, it's not that bad. It's not
yeah,
a
I
you
mean,
know,
that's how it always is, right? It's
yeah,
like once enough people try it and then figure out, oh, right, my because it's like the toxic conditioning of like social entities in the media realm, right? It's like there is that element where I need to generate views, I need to capture their attention. So is it sugar or is it the most sour salt? And more times than enough, it's the most sour salt. And so they'll come in with, oh, Stadia is this, Stadia is that. And then months pass by and it's like, oh, it's not that bad. And then it's just a whimper of like
yeah,
whatever, instead of it being like, oh, let's really give it a chance and observe what is the experience like, instead of just berating it without giving it a fair shot, which oftentimes is the case, right? I
yeah,
mean, Square legacy company made Final Fantasy, but has so many other titles that exist within their realm, but they keep coming back to Final Fantasy because they know the name, the recognition, that brand identity. It means a lot to a lot of people. And even then, when you look at something like Fortnite in comparison to scale and where we are now, right? It's all skewed, right? So it's one of those things where it's like you can easily find yourself pushing in a direction, like you have the intuition that this is something that's needed, but again, you're up against the storm and onslaught of people who they're, very hesitant, right? They're very limited in their ability to accept the new thing, even if the new thing makes a lot of sense, even if the new thing is going to usher in all the other things that they're going to go and praise and be like, oh my, the X Cloud, it's so amazing. And it's like,
yeah. The
okay,
new normal, it's
yeah,
like it's gonna be like kids aren't gonna know what it was like back in the day when all we had was solitaire and minesweeper. Uh, yeah,
dial up internet. None of them will ever know what it's like.
They won't know what it's like when you only had the Prince of Persia demo.
you mean like the old one where it was just like your person was like 8 pixels and like it
Yeah,
like
on the computer, and I just had the arrows and the space bar, and that
yeah,
was it.
yeah.
They won't
Yeah,
know.
I remember
wild
that.
times they won't know.
Blast from the past.
No, definitely. I mean, I touching on back onto the concept of like video games being such a core component. I mean, for me, a lot of times the concept of like the progression of a video game, like you see your character start off with a limited skill set, and then you have to acquire, right, either the experience points, or you have to expand on through the journey, right, to acquire the items and develop the life system to be able to compete with the bosses and the next levels of hurdles and challenges that will be faced on this journey. Do you feel like there's a parallel with, how you can find yourself almost living life like a video game? Like, do you see that as something that's common for you?
Yeah, yeah. I would say when all things, it's first of all, I believe that like God speaks to us through our passions. They talk about like the passion of the Christ and stuff. And I feel like when they say it says in Romans like you gotta liberate creation from bondage to decay. And I think in the act that when we create from the heart. It's an act. It's about freedom. When we talk about jazz, like jazz of like just like so many other art forms is about freedom. It's about breaking the chains. It's about uh, being true to you. It's not about being mass manufactured so that you'll make some other person, some privileged person, a lot of money. It's about like you living to be the best you that you were meant to be. And so when I think about, for me, video games, um, through the toughest times, you would just remember like I'm gonna if I keep trying, I'm gonna develop the skills. I'm gonna be able to get through it, and there's gonna be a way in which I'm gonna get that final victory that I was meant to have. Um, so for me, growing up, um, that was when I felt like the people around me didn't have hope. I found like God spoke to me through the video games. In the same way he spoke to me through jazz, and in the same way he was speaking through me through my poetry, right? Like God was like, look, don't some of these adults around you, they don't know what's going on. Just play your video games. And it's funny because I have a PhD in computer science and I work at one of the biggest companies in the world to work at, like one of the most competitive places to get into. So when I go and speak, if I'm speaking at a school or a church, I'm always asking the question like how many parents here are uncomfortable with their kid playing video games? And like so many of them raise their hand. I'm like, what if I told you that video games um is why I went on to get a PhD in computer science, because I knew I wanted to understand. I wanted to not just be a spectator, but I wanted to participate in what I was able to move through this medium through, because video games in it of itself is an art form.
Right.
And when I was 10 years old, I remember I had this moment. I was like, this is all like meaningless. Like this video game stuff, don't feed me the fairy tales. Like everything's just like pointless. And I feel like people of color, people who didn't get the benefit of having affluenza, um, like we kind of know what that moment is like, where you're kind of just like, what, this is all meaningless. I'm just working to make someone else more powerful. I'm just working to make someone else more rich. That's how I felt at 10. And I feel like in that moment where you're like, when you just like face to face with God, you're like, all right, you got to give me something more than this. And and then just be willing to put it all on the line, like go all in. just like just like in the games, you basically are like, well, my village burned down. What am I gonna do now? I'm gonna go all in on the adventure that's set before me. I'm gonna accept that quest. And for me, and like I'm giving you the short version, but like I had like probably the most real experience I ever had that led me to continue to pursue technology, to get a proficiency in it, and to be able to make it my own in ways that I thought was like bringing heaven to earth, as some people say, but like making the world in a way that I thought it was meant to be.
That's right. I know for myself, I experienced, a similar perspective, my life being very much RPG. And right, I'm just looking for, and I'm very much a collector type player, completionist type player, except for like speed running. I don't need a speed running trophy. Um, but I am looking for the Easter eggs and the things you can't get through your own lived experience, that you have to talk to people. You have to have an exchange with them as a side quest to learn about the world that I'm in, to learn about people, and to experience and exchange love. And I think that doesn't happen, if you go into the silo, right? If you shelter yourself, if you only surround yourself about people who agree with you, around people who agree with you, who talk like you, look like you miss out on what you think are NPCs, but they're really holding on to valuable information, and they're part of an ecosystem, right? That is here to support you, but only if you see it that way, right? If you don't, then you don't go on a side quest, you don't learn, you don't get, the equipment that takes you somewhere that you didn't think you could go.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel like I get you. I feel like I get you. Like, you know how you're in the dungeon and you're like, oh, it's like you've been in there for like an hour and you're like about to get out. And then as you're going out, you see there's like a treasure chest on this side of the screen and you didn't get that treasure chest.
Yeah,
And then you go all the way back to the beginning because that's where you went to go eat. That's where you had to go to get it. And I'm the kind of person that I'm like, I need to know what's in. I just want to know what's in there. Like
yeah,
I just want to know, or like you see, you're like there's like you're in the village, in some new village, and there's a person in the corner, but you can't figure out how to get to that person. You're like more than like anyone else in that village. You want to talk to that person that's like, why is that person in that place that I can't get to? I'm gonna look for every corner for all the secret passages that'll get me to that spot so I can talk to that person.
yeah.
That was me. Like like university was like that village, where you wanted to, like I went to school or I went to some community place and I was like, I like who's gonna vibe with me? Who's gonna like get me? Who's gonna like I wanna see change. I wanna make an impact. Who's that person that has that item or has that gonna unlock that door that's gonna get me to that place. And then when you're like, oh, like, PhD, like getting that is just basically you just stay in college long enough and you just keep leveling up, and then when you get to level 99, that's the PhD, right? Actually, there's more than that. You can keep going for like tenure track and stuff. But you know what I'm saying? Like
That's right.
I
Game
was
Plus.
yeah. I
Game Plus.
was a Ronald E. Mcnair scholar. I don't know if you're familiar with. He was the I believe he's the first Black astronaut. He had a PhD in physics, and they created a scholars program for him to help students of color, students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, get into grad school so they could be part of higher education. And so I was always seeking out whatever trio we in the East Coast we call them trio programs. Like I was like, oh, it's like Upward Bound or whatever. Like, sign me up. Like, I'll take any head start. Anything that can push me forward. I was gonna take it. All the power ups, like every treasure
That's
chest.
it.
Did that
That's
to me.
right.
And I think that's everything. Even like when someone was like, oh, there's internships at Google. I was like, sign me up. Like, and they're like, we'll let you in. We'll let you in. You could be part of YouTube. I got to be part of YouTube for like 3 months. As an intern, and that was just me. Like the people you talk to are the ones that are going to give you that quest. And it was just I happened to be upon a person that was like, let me let you know about this opportunity, and this is how you go for it. And so I just signed up, and your life just changes after that.
Straight up. And I think your perspective is so like relevant to a lot of different people, but especially folks in the summertime of school, right before they go back into their fall semester or start a new school or new grade or transition in life, that they can, look for those opportunities, and they can look for those head starts and those power ups, and that you relate university to that ecosystem of support, where you say, okay, where is the help, where is, the camaraderie, but also, who are the catalysts, where are my, the people that are going to, join me, where's my party that's going to help me
Yeah.
level up. And I think a lot of times people think that they have to experience it alone, and you can have people, right, walking alongside each other, right, in the same courtyard, not realizing that they're looking for each other, not realizing that, they can both benefit from each other, and they're going through a very similar experience, And whether you're in your first year or your third year, you know, people can find that help, that assistance, that community. And I think that's so important to hear that just having a community can lead to opportunities closer to your path. And I think they say, right, the closest we'll get to, sometimes the closest you'll get to God is a person across from you. And like just talking to that person may move you towards your purpose.
Yeah, I think it was Dave Gibbons. I was like, you're one conversation away from achieving your dreams.
Right. Yeah, that's Dave.
Yeah, like that's true. Like that person's gonna give you. You're like blocked. Sometimes you in a game and you're like, I've been in games where I just stopped playing because I was like, I can't. I just can't figure this one out, right? And then you move on to the next game. But it's like it was that one person that you didn't that like was right there in front of you that you needed to say something to. Sometimes. So
Oh yeah,
yeah,
that's
like
good.
yeah, and that's the thing is that you gotta take command of your destiny or your journey, where you're headed, because there's a lot. We're in an attention economy now, right? Like there's a lot trying to get you to get you to buy the thing, need the thing. Like they want to assign you a narrative. So if you don't define your own narrative, if you're not the hero on your journey, you're gonna be someone else. You're gonna be the NPC of some privileged person who had everything
Man,
to them. So you gotta
tell
like,
it,
yeah,
tell it.
I'm preaching video games. So
Yeah, so it's wild because I was just telling some young people that this evening, right, to choose their identity, right, the same way you choose your loadout, the same way you choose your avatar, right, choose that identity instead of what somebody else wants you to be or how other people describe you, like even how your family or your last name or your culture, right, you can still choose all of who you want to be and how you see yourself. And like it's so important to be at the head of your destiny, in that way. Cheryl, I want to ask you, like, how many different things are you a part of right now that you can tell us about, because it seems like it's a lot.
yeah, yeah, and I just want to say like what you're saying about that message you're sending to the next generation of leaders, those who are probably already leading in their own ways, like that is the key, because otherwise you like there's so many people that just want you to be part of their system. It's like about they talk about the kingdom of God. It was real. If you look at the Greek, it's like it's really the metropolis of God. It was about the city. I know before this call we were talking about city life, but like people talking about kingdoms is all like hierarchical, and like there's a king, and they're always like, no, Jesus is the king. But no, like they're trying to build a kingdom where they're the king and you're just one of the servants of them as a king. And it's
Right.
like, don't just like these people gatekeeping Jesus, like need to stop. Like we need to see through that. And I feel like you're often better just figuring it out on your own sometimes than falling in line with what these people are trying to build. But yeah, and what am I a part of? So I already we talked about passiontalks.org.
Right.
We talked about the Monterey Jazz Festival, also a .org. And then we talked about Google Research. And so you can check that out. The website I'm working on is Sherol.org right now. So just,
Hey, let's go, let's go.
yeah, SHEROL.org. You can find me on Twitter, FF Paladin. But of those things, my dream of all dreams is the university. Is to reimagine the university. I know Dave talks about the academy, and I feel like he's the real deal. Like I love what he doesn't just talk the talk. He really walks the walk.
That's
And
right.
so I'm like, I'll take what like if people want to pour into my dreams, like the things that I want to see happen, I'm all for it because I feel like we kind of in some ways you find the people that want the same things to happen and you go for it. And it's not about one person succeeding at the cost of the other. It's that it all is like additive, it's all multiplicative, like it all kind of comes together. And so my big thing is reimagining the university, and I want to like figure out how we could do independent research, how we could do some of the stuff that the university system, I mean, it's pretty ubiquitous. It's like everywhere, but it's got some it's got some issues that I wonder if we can like remake. So that's the thing that I'm dreaming about these days. But for the most part, like I said once that if you summarize my life in 3 words, it would be jazz, Jesus, and video games. And so that that has been true in my life for as long as I can remember. It's always been jazz, Jesus, and video games. I guess maybe like since I was 10 years old, that was like the moment for me where I heard that. Um, but yeah, that's what I'm a part of.
Nice. I love that. I love that age, that turning point age. You know, at 10 years old, that fourth, fifth grade. You know, when things shift for you, and I think it's really important that you know you again you're very aware of your those themes in your life, and just like that idea of reimagine university, it's like everyone has their own spirit bomb, right? Where people can contribute and you know ask for help, but only one person holds it, right? Like Goku's the only one holding the spirit bomb, right? And he's his hero in his story, but he's willing to ask for help, right? As many times as he needs to, in as many lives, no matter how many times he loses, no matter how many people he's got to fight, he's like, okay, I'm going as far as I can on my own. You know, let me ask for help now from
He, need,
everyone, right?
he needed the people to find all the Dragon Balls so he could come back.
Yeah, right. So many times, like he's the hero and he's the strongest, but he's also like regularly like aware that he needs help.
It's so true. So that moment when I was 10, God spoke to me. He said, I was ready. I was just like, I'm done. I'm like the picture I had in my head is like, I wanna deal me a new hand. Like I saw like, you know how they had the reset button on the consoles? Like I was
Oh
like,
yeah.
I want to do that on my life, like press that reset button. Let's start over. Sometimes it's like, I don't know how you all game. Like sometimes it's if you lose the power up too soon, you're like, I'm gonna start over again. You don't want to
Been
like
there.
that's how
Yep.
I felt. Is that like I didn't score that thing I needed to score. I didn't get the thing I wanted to get. I need to start over. I was just ready. I was checking out, and I was like, God, you need to give me something meaningful. And if you show me something better than what we got right now going on, I will give you the rest of my life. And God said 3 things to me. He said the first thing was that the people around you are living for themselves. That's why it doesn't seem like there's hope, because they're just living from one moment of satisfaction to the next moment. And if you just live for yourself, your life is gonna feel meaningless. It's not you're gonna keep chasing that, and then when you don't have it, you're gonna feel bad, and then when you have it, you're gonna be afraid of losing it, and that's what all your life is gonna be. It's not gonna mean anything. And so I'm just 10. I'm just like, all right, I'm following you. Yeah, that seems like that matches what I see around me in the world is people just trying to get for themselves. And God said, it's not about that. It's about what you can give. You can give infinitely to the people around you. That's where the supply comes from. Is that your heart being postured in a way where you're not trying to collect for yourself, but you can outwardly give so much. And I was like, all right. Like, but like I want to go to heaven now. I remember saying that to God. I was like, I'm like, I heard there's this place called heaven. I'd rather be there instead of here. And this is what God said. No joke. Like he said, you could be there now, but in that time, all the people that you were gonna help, if you had stayed, aren't gonna get the help that they need, and it could mean the lives of five. In my head is like, if you live to 100, you're 10, and like in that 90 years, he's like, there's gonna be like five people's heaven, five people's eternity depends on you living out those 90 years of your life. And
Wow.
I was just like, I was doing the math, I was just like, like calculating the points. And I was like, all right, he's like 90 years versus like heaven for 5 people. Like, what's worth more? And I was like, all right. So those 5 people are worth more. Then like even one person would be worth it.
Right.
And then the last thing, the thing that like, the thing is basically touching on what you said is that like, I feel really alone in this. And God said, yeah, because the message I gave you, only you can share it. I didn't give that message to nobody else. Like, no one who came before you spoke that whatever I have in you, no one after you is going to speak it. It's just you. So you can either be to the point where you're going to share that with the tapestry of the universe, like share that out there and make that contribution, or we can just it could just not exist. That's your like value that you bring. And he even said, don't try to understand it now, because you're not going to get it until you're ready to speak it. Like he was just like, you're 10, like don't make it too complicated right now. Like, when it's time, you'll know. And then I said, I don't want to be alone though. I'm like that, like this is where the conversation like wraps up. Like, it's been so hard, I feel so alone. And I distinctly heard God say, when you get there, the others are gonna be there. And it was like this X-Men, like Avengers moment where he was like, don't worry about it. I think he didn't want to set up my expectation that it was gonna just all of a sudden get better, because it didn't. It was just kind of like a journey. And I feel like all of y'all probably get it. Like that hero's journey is kind of a lonely one sometimes. And then when you get there, you will finally find the others, was the sense that I got. And so that, to me, that conversation is more real than this conversation we're having right now. That was like the vivid moment defining of my life, where I was like, I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna look for the highest point, and I'm just gonna collect all the power ups that are gonna get me there.
That's amazing.
That is infinitely amazing. That is super amazing. I mean, it's profound in so many ways. Oftentimes, as I've said many times, right? You're not given the choice in living, right? No one comes to you and says, "Do you want to do this?" Guess what? This is your family. This is your community. This is where you're going to be, and you're here. And then you start to conceptualize. Wait, hold on. There's more than this, right? There's alternatives. There's differences. There's variations. And why do I have this one? Right? It's like, how did I get this set of the loadout? Right? I didn't even get to pick the class, but then at a point you do, right? We're going to starting the game over. You can start the game over as much as you need to, but you have to remember how much you took for granted and how difficult and hard it was. You came into this world unable to do for yourself. You didn't have the means to talk, you didn't have the means to move. That goes for every single one of us. We come in with the lowest barometer of skills, the lowest XP, HP, right? The mana, whatever you want to call it, right? We come in with the absolute bare minimum. And then once we get past that, we get to come back to that, right? To that moment of, oh, I actually have more experience. I have something more that I didn't have before every day that I get to go. And if I say, you know what, I don't want to do this thing no more, right? I don't want to go in this direction. You carry with you the experience and the knowledge and the skills that you've developed to that point to then decide, okay, how will that transfer over to what I want to do now, right? So even when you decide to reset, right, there's someone right now who may be struggling with their major or struggling with a job or struggling with a relationship, and you get to take the knowledge that you've gained and acquired, and you get to say, you know what, I'm going to play the game again, and now I have this much more experience. I have this much more of a skill set. I have this much more life to give to the next opportunity. Because it is a thing where, yeah, it's, sometimes we get the divine intervention of God speaking directly to us, or sometimes it's the person that we talk to, or the person that we see, or the video we watch, or the video game we play, where we realize, oh, someone had to make this. Someone poured their own perspective into this thing, and it resonates with my own. And this metaphor the game is creating by me playing through this journey is one that's reflected in my own life, where yes, sometimes you will go to that mountaintop. How many games are there by chance? You just, the cutscene is happening and now epicness is unfolding. You just walked into the moment, right? Where it's like, oh, the character looks lost. Next thing you know, that was exactly what's supposed to happen. And that is everyone's individual journey. And it is true that we have to acknowledge, where do we get to choose that? Where do we get to choose being the main character in our own story and seeing where the journey takes us, and being able to define what the goal is? Or if you're comfortable being the NPC, if you're comfortable going along and being a part of someone else's journey, I'm not going to say there's anything wrong with that, but it is something that you have to be aware of, that it is a choice. It is something that you choose to do at some point. There is a aha moment where you have to come to terms with what was given to you. It wasn't about whether or not you deserved it. It's about, how do you learn from it? How do you deal with the cards dealt, right? Not sit there and say, this is all I'll be. This is where I'm starting from. And then where do I want to go from here? And it's hard, but it's never as hard as being someone who's unable to talk, someone who's unable to communicate, unable to move, unable to do for themselves. We couldn't feed ourselves. Think about the times when you have an inclination for some food and you're like, oh, I just want to eat this. And to some degree, you could figure out a way to accomplish that. And you're a baby, you don't get none of that. You don't got no choice, right? And it's one of those things where it's easy to lose sight of that we come into this situation with such a disadvantage in terms of our abilities, that it's easy to minimize and not look at the scope of who we really are and our infinite ability and the amazingness of who we are to overcome, to do. Because it's, as you said, right, 10, you broke through, you saw the matrix, you was like, yeah, I don't know, right? And then, right, divine intervention. All right, well, let me just leave you with this, right? It's up to you, right? You can say, this is it, come on here. Or you can also show others what here is. But it's up to you to decide, which journey do you want to take, right? And then going on the hero's journey, yeah, it is true, it can be lonely at times. And for me as well, it's one of those things where you got to know who your community is, and it's not the one that you're given, it's the one that you choose, it's the one that you develop, it's the people that you have to, you refine the process of relationships to go on the journey, to see who are these people that are going to be the supports, because they don't start out with you. You got to find each other, right? It is a thing where it's like the Avengers, everyone's going off in their own little movie, doing their own thing, and then what happens? They come together, right? It intersects where all of our individual goals are actually interwoven if we choose to accept that. And so yeah, it's profoundly amazing, that you had that moment, that you had that experience, because a lot of people, I know just for myself hearing it, it's profound, it's amazing, and it's another touch point to call back to for myself when, yeah, the insecurity creeps in, the self-doubt pops up, and you start to get in your head, and then you realize, like, oh wait, there is more to it if I choose to see what more there is. And I think that, yeah, it's like, that's so important, and I hope other people can really understand how they can take and learn and see into that for themselves, because it's easy for people to lose sight, especially at times like this when everything seems crazy and it just gets crazier, more bizarre, where it's like, oh, I'm so consumed with what's being given to me that I don't realize I don't have to take it. It's available, it's accessible, it's within my proximity, but I can move away from here. Whether that's the mental state, whether that's the spiritual state, the physical state, you can disengage and you can realign yourself with new parallels, with new peers, with new opportunities, right? Like you said, a conversation can change your life. And oftentimes, if we're afraid to speak up, or we don't take the time to figure out how to get to the person that we need to have the conversation with, we miss out, right? In games, we fail, we lose. There's failure in it. That happens. Not every battle will be won. We try,
Right.
but again, you learn from those experiences. And it's the same thing when you deal with rejection. It's the same thing when you deal with adversity. It's the same thing when you're dealing with situations that may not seem like they're for you. And you know what? They may not be. And that's the beauty of it. is that it shows you what's for you by showing you that it's not for you. And that's sometimes hard for people to accept because we live in a universe where conflict and resolution are happening at the same time. You can look at quantum mechanics, you can look at the chemical basis of everything we do, and they're always trying to find how do we get these things to make sense with each other. That's the beauty in it. It's in conflict and harmony at the same time, all the time. Now, if you choose to put yourself in proximity where it's the sweet spot, hence the sun and the earth, guess what? You got life. If you choose to get so far away that you don't feel the heat, but you can see the light, well, again, you have the ability to decide what do you want to put your proximity in and where and how when it comes to the choices you make, the decisions, the people, the relationships, the opportunities, the things that we do with our time. I mean, there's so much to think about and parse through. It's like, yeah, thinking of Final Fantasy IV and how the idea of a job, right, this role, then becomes something that is reoccurring that we come back to. And I think it is something that we can say that it's assigned to us by some larger entity, or it's just what we get paid to do. But more importantly, beyond that, it's what you decide, right? And how do you choose to see yourself outside of that, beyond the scope of that? And I think that you've definitely, like, through, whether it's working for Google, or the advocacy that you're doing for youth, or your ability to be, dealing with the Monterey Jazz Festival, like, these are all opportunities that you lean into, that you say, you know what, I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna go, I'm gonna find out, hey, sign me up. Let me go and apply myself and just see what happens. And then it grows, it expands. You get more HP, you get more experience, and then the journey continues. And I think that's a beautiful thing to see, because yeah, it's easy to say, you know what, I'm done, when there's so much more to do. And I think that, yeah, like, yeah, it's dope. I mean, as far as artificial intelligence is concerned, what is artificial intelligence to you? How do you communicate that to others, and what you see as your perspective in relationship to what artificial intelligence is?
I mean, I've taught AI from everywhere from like 10-year-olds to like graduate level. And it's always like, I've written about it, like I'm in, actually, there's a book called Halo and Philosophy. I'm like the last chapter of that book. I'm the author of it. So I wrote even a chapter. I talked about whether Cortana, not Cortana the assistant, but Cortana the AI, the ship in the woman AI in the game. She was a whether she would pass like the Turing test for AI. And so I've thought so much about this. And I mean, it goes back to what we said at the beginning. It's about, like, artificial intelligence is, you break it down, it's artificial, which is man-made, and intelligence, which is really hard to define. So let's dive into intelligence. This is like when I've taught it, and it's like to help people of all levels get it. I ask them, what is that? What is intelligence? And then I ask them, sometimes these things that are hard to find, you can kind of rank them, or you can kind of say, well, everything in column A is intelligent and everything in column B isn't intelligent, right? So like I would say, like, is a rock intelligent? And oftentimes, like, if you're, kids, adults, they'll say no, rock isn't intelligent. Then I get a little tricky. I'm like, well, I don't know, like, is a pair of scissors intelligent? And people, like, if they were gonna rank it, they're like, all right, a pair of scissors might be a little more intelligent than a rock. And then I ask them, what about a calculator? And they'll be like, all right, that's a little more intelligent. And then, like, I keep going up. And then we'll ask questions like, well, what about your dog at home? Like, is your dog intelligent? And again, you just start asking people how they conceptualize it. Because artificial intelligence is a term that changes definition throughout history. You like if you really want to know what AI is, you got to read the 1950 Alan Turing paper about can machines think. It's his famous paper, and that's where he talks about the Turing test. There's a movie called The Imitation Game about Alan. And then if you want to know where the term comes from, it's in the 60s at Dartmouth College. There's a summer school that they had where they created this concept called artificial intelligence. I mean, they had been working on that before they even came up with the terminology. So there's a history of what is artificial intelligence. And then as far as what is man-made intelligence, it goes kind of to the core of what does it mean to be human, which is the question we kind of talked about at the beginning of all of this, is that technology exists uh, to help us understand and to be better at what it means to be who we are. And so when you're recreating intelligence, like back in the day, we had to remember our phone numbers. Like they would, you'd be a little kid, get on the school bus, and one of the things they teach you is like, just make sure you know your parents' phone number, because when something happens, that's how you reach them. Nowadays, like you only know one phone number, and that's yours, so you can give it to other people. Um, People don't remember numbers anymore because the technology has basically augmented their memory, their ability to remember. We have superpowers now where we can communicate across the world, and it just feels instantaneous. We're sitting here like miles and like 100 miles away, like from each other, and we're able to talk as if we're in the same room. And
Right.
so it's like, what is this servicing? Because I see like one of the things that I'm like, where you're like, oh, where can AI is getting really good, right?
Right.
And I'm seeing these people on TikTok, and I had it installed for a second. Like I was like, this is too good. It's learning me, it's knowing me in ways that I don't even understand myself. Like it's gonna learn how to get you on it and keep you on it, and it's rewarded based off of how long you can stay on it. And if you don't have a literacy, let me give you an example. 100 years ago, how many people do you think? What percentage of the world do you think could read 100 years ago or 200 years ago? Right? If you look at the charts, the censuses that they had back then, it was like 10% of the world. Like you go back a few hundred years, is 10% of the world could read. Why did that change? Because we could print. Technology made it so that we could have books, we could have manuals, magazines. The internet made all sorts of things accessible now, and pretty much it's flipped. Now it's 10% of the world can't read or write. It's 90% of it went from 10% could to now 90% can. And why did was that a necessity? Is because reading became ubiquitous. It became an everywhere thing. That's what we're seeing with the internet. That's what we're seeing with technology. And so what it requires is a new level of literacy, a new level of understanding, and to not feel like I'm never gonna get this. Like one of my favorite verses is love God with your heart, soul, mind, and your strength. And I feel like what they forget is like you can love with your mind. Like your mind, like love. And what does love with your mind look like? It looks like understanding. And when you are feeling like you're in the moment, you're feeling something, your ability to like absorb and retain is like just unparalleled than when you're not. So to me, it's like artificial intelligence. I feel like I took you guys on a journey.
Keep
Artificial
going.
Yeah.
artificial intelligence is man-made intelligence, and then you just got to break down intelligence. And intelligence is, once you can give me a definition for intelligence, I can help you figure out whether we've achieved it, whether how we would achieve it, the design around it, what function it must serve. Like it comes down to knowing your purpose, because otherwise someone's going to invent a purpose. Like if someone's goal is to captivate the attention of like the entire next generation, and they create an algorithm to like make you stuck on your phone, as opposed to like you kind of taking control of it. Like I didn't want to just play video games, I wanted to make video games, right? And so I think if and again, even in the act of making, I also have a YouTube channel called Squirbles. It's a bunch of squirrels. I get addicted to like seeing the numbers go up and down too. And
Right.
so Pikachu, by
Beautiful
the way,
ones.
is a squirrel. Pikachu was, people always think it's a mouse or even a rabbit. It's actually drawn after a squirrel. I really like squirrels. But like there are things where they try to get you hooked on these platforms. And if you don't have the literacy to understand what's happening to you, you're gonna just you're gonna become the NPC of some other privileged, hero's journey that
Bars.
you may not really want to be part of that. You might be driving that train You know, you may
Yeah.
be driving those passes. You may be like in that driving people to concentration camps, and you wouldn't even know because you're just doing your job and you didn't have the understanding of what was going on around you. So yeah, that's basically like man-made intelligence, and then you need to like what people should meditate on is what they believe intelligence is and for what purpose does intelligence exist.
No, definitely. I appreciate that. It gives me a lot to chew on, and I want to say throw my ignorant ticket in the hat that intelligence is understanding purpose. Like, that's what it is to me. Because when you talk about the rock is intelligent because it is a collection of memories, and whether or not people choose to see that, that's then whether or not they can reflect and acknowledge their own arrogance and ego. And that's the design of the universe, is that everything has intelligence. We want to quantify it instead of seeing all of the pieces and integral to the whole, and want to segment it to then categorize it and organize it in a way that add superiority or inferiority, instead of realizing that the rock has minerals. It exists because of the culmination of the geographical formation of its surrounding area and everything that has happened over time that has created that rock. But instead, we want to assign whether or not it can drive a car. And that's extremely limited, because then you lose sight of the fact that your body needs minerals to live. So, where's the priority at, and how does it exist in the proximity of how we assign intelligence? Again, it's to me, again, it's the collection of the memories that created the thing, and then identifying what that purpose is outside of the scope of our own arrogance and ego. Because even with our artificial intelligence, what happens when artificial intelligence becomes indifferent to interfacing with humans? Then your Turing test gets thrown out the window because it doesn't care about your questions. So again, we limit ourselves based off of our own stance as humans, instead of our relationship to the universe around us and how we participate in this whole magnificent thing, rather than being the superior the gatekeepers or holders of what these things are. And so, yeah, when it comes to intelligence and artificial intelligence, at that, it's steadily growing and developing, and Cortana being one of the most emotional artificial beings, who then goes through her own personal journey of life and existence, and then the fragileness of what does it mean to end. Again, the same thing for the rock. As soon as it goes back into the sun, guess what? Well, purpose is redefined, and so be it the earth. And I think that people, we want to sit high, when in reality, when you look at Mount Everest, there's more than enough bodies up there to remind you that you're actually quite low. And when you look at the Mariana Trench, you're actually quite high. So, when knowing those differences in the extremes, when understanding the limitations and how we can push the boundaries and exceed the capacity, we also have to do that in reverse when it comes to how we define intelligence, because everything has intelligence. It's just whether or not you care to take the time to disassociate your own sense of self and how much you think it's important, and realizing that the most important thing is that you're here amongst it all. And yeah, that's my belief on that. So, you know I just intelligence, what do you make of it? Gravity is intelligent. But again, it's whether or not you want to see the intelligence within it. And I think that, yeah, it's artificial intelligence is something that, yeah, everyone should be aware of and have the literacy to understand, because if they don't, I mean, media is another form of artificial intelligence. Since the inception of Sigmund Freud and the therapeutic groups they would have to get people to buy things. I mean,
You see the century of self.
hey, hey, ding, 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 pew, 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 air homes, pew. Century itself is, I've been telling everybody
Everyone should
about it.
watch it.
Everyone should watch it. I'm so glad you were able to cut through and see into that, because it is a part of who we are, and it is a part of us having that literacy to see outside of ourselves, to then know, am I doing this because this is instinctual, right? Like jazz. In jazz, when you play, there's this moment when you get in touch with the divine, when you become a part of the ethereal, right? Where you become one with the music and you resonate at at a vibration that is like it's transcendent. It's like, oh my goodness, like this feeling, this sense of, oh my, like playing a game and you get in a flow state and you overcome every obstacle and you're like, I can't believe I just did this. There's these moments when you become so in tune with the core self that the concept of time, the concept of rationality and logic go to the wayside of overcoming and accomplishing whatever the task and goal is at hand. And yeah, when it comes to Century of the Self, there's the other side of it when it's like, let's induce fear. Let's create the concept of irrationality. Let's make it more about you rather than who you are amongst the stars. And I think that that's the thing that, like, at least in my interpretation of that movie, Century of the Self, it's on YouTube. You can watch it. It's 4 hours long. It's not the most zingy, sticky, not delivered in the most modern fashion of information. But if you give yourself the opportunity to absorb what's being said, that's one of many slices in the spectrum of life that we have that exposes how manipulation and artificial intelligence plays a role in how you get people to do or not do. And I think that, yeah, The Rock is intelligent, not Dwayne Johnson.
Well,
I
I
mean,
feel
he's
like
intelligent too,
I
but I'm
feel
saying
like
not that
yeah.
Rock.
I saw him on Moana. I was like, this guy's got talent,
For
Like
real,
Yeah.
that voice.
I was like, I didn't know he could sing like that. Yeah, let me just say like one way, like it's a design thing where it's like if the Rock is intelligent and you're creating artificial intelligence, why would you want to recreate? I mean, and I think there are reasons why. An example is like artificial flight. You know how like early you see these like early sketches like Michelangelo drawings of like wings, and you try
Wings.
to get a man to like fly. And there's all these stories about flying too close to the sun and things like that. But like we saw that there was this thing called flight, and we were like, we want a man-made version of that. We were like, in the same way that's like we make these decisions. There's an elevator person that used to like crank the elevator to get you to the floor you wanted to go to. And we were like, we want to build an artificial version of that, what that person's job is. We want to be able to fly like the birds and the seagulls in the air that we see. And so initially they built artificial flight. They try to model it after the birds in the sky, and then they realized that when they actually were successful, they actually had to find other ways of engineering that. And so it's not it's both like, why is it the thing that you want to recreate, and also like, do you want to imitate that thing, or do you have to find another way of getting there? And so like it comes down to like, it always has to come down to like, it's a technology, and why are you building this technology? Are you using it in a way that's like, people say, oh, here's the one thing people say about like automation, right? When we talked about the elevator guy or the operator that used to have to like, they had to like plug in the lines so that you could connect rather than just go over the internet or go through the internet, which the internet, by the way, are just cables that run throughout the oceans and basically go from continent to continent. So it's still the same thing with the cables, but now we kind of have all these systems in place. But like when we talk about automation, what they're saying is if we figure out how to automate the jobs that people don't want to do, it's going to give people a chance to do the jobs that they do want to do. And some that might be for someone to be a dad. That might be like they want to be an artist, and they have more time and resources and ability to do that because we figured out ways of taking care of the work that we normally would have had to do. Now, what's going to happen then in the ideal situation is our work weeks just get shorter. There's just less work to do because we've automated everything along the way. Eventually, we're just working like one day a week or so. Imagine you have a 6-day weekend and then you just got to work that one day, right? That could be, I mean, that's what people say is some of the goals is like to make it so no one has to do something they don't want to do ever again, that we've just got technology so on point. Um, but those of us who have been around are like, we all know what's going to happen is that people are going to figure out how to do things more efficiently. We're still going to have to work as much as we've been working, maybe even more. And then there's going to be a few people at the top that like get to reap and collect and get to do whatever they want to do. Like, take trips to the moon or something, like, whatever crazy thing's going to happen in the future. Um, that's why we need to have a sense of where things are going, where things are at. I mean, think about it, right? We could have a world without work. Like those things that you hate doing, there could be an invention someday that makes it so you never have to do that again.
And so, me being me, I'm hard headed. And with being hard headed, it is a thing where the thing that we with every forward step in technology, we disassociate every step we take as a collective. And this is my reasoning. Um, Technology oftentimes is about finding opportunities for innovation, right? You go into flight, it's then about, oh, we can now fly across the world, right? Now, is it the most efficient and sustainable form of flight? No, but it's not to say we're not developing that or not seeking the innovation in that. But there are gatekeepers again, right? There are gatekeepers who benefit in many ways to maintain a status quo that they foresee as sustainable to their wealth or to the way to obtain their power and maintain their power. And so technology, I think, is infinitely incredible in its ability to expose and to have us do things in a more efficient manner. Now, people, people who seek ownership or don't value the ability to give people freedom, because they exist. We see it because there is a structure that's at work that we live within, where there's a thing called the work week. There is a thing where people struggle, people are in the most dire straits that not everyone's going to get the opportunity. And it's not that I've made peace with it. I've accepted the reality. And my way of opposing that is, right, having these conversations, uplifting the people around us, showing others what it means to overcome and to be inspired and motivated to find their own practice, their own discipline, to push forward, to press on. But it is a thing that it's not to disassociate from the potential for harm, because as long as there are people who benefit from harm, harm will exist. And so these conversations is about identifying what are the ways to repair it, what are the ways to restore it. Because yeah, we get lost in the sauce of, oh, we can, so we should, instead of, well, we can, but to what degree is this sustainable and what are all of the variables? Because I can speak from my own experience. My mother, she worked as a toll collector, and that was a job she loved doing. And Golden Gate Bridge was one of the first to get rid of their toll workers. And I remember being a kid saying, I want to do that. And so when automation came, they all got the boot. And so it was a thing where I had seen firsthand how you can take a subculture, because they had their own subculture there. It's something that I appreciated as a child, and now it's obsolete. And as much as she went into other avenues of things that she wanted to do, it was never the same, and it was never the same for her peers. And that's kind of what happens, is that we find ourselves where some will benefit and some will not. And the resolve is when we come together and we share these stories and we start to identify the different mathematical probabilities of outcomes and all of the variations of what will be produced as we execute these commands. That's when we start to define purpose and intelligence, because a computer is going to be given commands and is going to execute. When the computer is given commands and then it deliberates what to execute, or it's given so many commands that it's able to sift through and decide what is worth executing, again, automation, artificial intelligence, it is necessary because it does create opportunities. But if we don't create the alternatives that are readily available for people, then we're not serving sustainability, we're serving masters. We're serving masters who seek to have people to serve them. And so it's just something to be mindful of as we all explore this world and we all decide how do we show up and how we navigate. Because yeah, it is a thing where too much of anything is bad. It's all about
True.
balance. And I'm big on sustainability, I'm big on relationships, and I'm big on understanding our proximity to the thing versus saying it's this and that's it. Because again, As soon as you say this is the thing, and then it's like the way to surmise it in the most succinct way, nothing is to scale because we don't plan for scale, and that's why we get the situations that we do. So I think that, we have to be very mindful of what does it mean to do things to scale, because we have a world that is already exceeding the bounds of its capacity amongst ourselves with how we treat each other, with how we develop our systems of care, with how we identify and address and communicate. And it's not to scale. We have to really be mindful of that, because the most enriching thing that I found is when I have the people closest to me. The most unengaged and inauthentic thing that definitely feeds the synapses that have desires that are always firing is when it's far beyond the scope of my capacity. Social media is definitely a tool, but it is also used to make tools out of people. So scale, 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 scale. So yeah, it's just one of those things. Got
Yeah.
to pay attention to.
I like, yeah, and I feel like we're on the same page, because it's like there are a lot of good things that can come out of, like, we're able to, like, the mobile phone, the smartphone, we can go into, we can, like, it's like a medical device that you take into any parts of the world, and you can end up helping so many people, right? And if used in the right way. Otherwise, you're just kind of lining, like, if you're just kind of letting anyone develop the technology, like, who's to stop them from lining their pockets with money and power, right? And
Right.
so that's where the education is important. That's why we gotta empower all like you were saying, you're like working with like young people. We gotta empower them to feel like this is not other people's stuff. This is like in the same way that everyone learns to read and write now. We've gotta like we gotta get people in these spaces, so it's not just an elite that's like making these decisions. And even if they're trying to be woke about it, like they're still not going to get it because they didn't come from that. Like, I work at a company where I have more in common with the people serving me the free food than I do with the people that I sit next to. Like the people that are on my team and that I work with. I grew up like the people that people are just like kind of like, it's almost like this working class that you don't like they're almost like another aspect of this ecosystem that like when I see the way I see them with, they come out with food that's like different than the food that they're serving. I just know that that's what you do. You always have the special thing that you make that
Yeah.
you don't make for the other people. Like I have these moments where I'm like, I get that.
But
Um,
that's the
yeah,
beauty in it, is that
yeah,
you being there and you being here breaks it all down. Like you break through the noise of what is the conundrum, what is the monotony, the repetitiveness of harm, by just being vocal, by you just being you. It ends that, because it shows others that they can do it, and it shows others that they can think like you, to have that awareness, to cut through the noise, to show like it is about us finding ways to have access, to participate, to engage. So the tools aren't being used against us. We're informed on how to use them to create our own, to develop our own thing, where we're not seeking out the other entities, right? Like you seen an opportunity, you went for it, and now you're opening up those opportunities to get people to see beyond themselves, to be like, oh yeah, I could do this too. Or you know what, maybe I do need to let my kid explore their relationship to technology in a different way, video games. So then it becomes this thing where people can be like, she's there and she's saying these things and she's showing up like this. She's wearing the Pikachu hat. Then there's room for me to exist and do what I want to do within the same space. And once more people can see that and have access to it, the scale changes, because now it's not about who's on the outside. It's about, oh, I know her. I feel comfortable to approach her because I understand and I see that like she loved Final Fantasy 4. I love Final Fantasy 16. This is where we meet. This is where we converge, right? These are the moments where we see how do we come together, the parallels, the ties that bond us, that bring us together. Because it is a thing where, yeah, we could develop Cortana and have that extra piece of relationship where, yeah, the technology, like our phones, they're just an extension of ourselves. They are now our digital companion that house our memories and houses our moments and our feelings and our thoughts. I mean, predictive text is always reminding me how many things I misspell, and it shows me that, oh wait, a lot of my words that are misspelled are words that I use. So again, these relationships are all, again, harmony and conflict all in one. Where you want to be within that, that's your choice and decision to make. And so, yeah, like Cheryl, thank you so much for joining us and being with us, because you've given us so much and it is highly appreciated.
Man, time flew. Time flew by. I feel like, and then when you were talking about like having divine encounters through stories, like, and then we're talking about the Avengers, like, I gotta say, like, I feel like I don't care what kind of movie it is, I cry for every Avengers movie I watch. I'm like, that's me. Like, I don't even know, it could be any of the characters. I'm like, this is life. Like, what they're, I don't know how the Marvel people, like, when we're like talking about prophets and stuff, I feel like they just kind of knew where the world was headed and what the world needed. Like, even the way WandaVision like came out, I know we're about to end, and I'm like kind of starting opening a whole nother can of worms. But WandaVision was all about television, and Marvel was moving into television, and then we were all here because of the pandemic, and then
But
Falcon and Winter Soldier came out, and then I can't even begin to like talk
But
about
that's
how I
that
love.
divine synchronicity, right? That getting more in tune with your core self. You had a bunch of people with imaginations create stories, and then it impacted people. And now generations later, they're taking those stories and they're presenting them to the masses because it's being seen as something that's appreciated, right? Like geeks geeks run the world at all times. At all times, it's the geeks who make it happen, right? The pyramids, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, the bridges, the trains, the automobiles, the planes, the video games. The geeks are the reason. The rock, right? Used as a tool. It's the geeks. The geeks are the one who are tinkering. The geeks are the one who see the value in everything and use their imagination to bridge the gap from the future into the present, because that's what the imagination is. And with storytelling, especially with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, when you find the people that get into the flow state, it's only going to show you what's to come, right? I never forget Metal Gear Solid 2 and playing that game as a kid, and then 9/11 happens, right? And all the world changes. To know that I learned about a meme in a game that just had no association to the internet to the degree of what it is now, and now the way we communicate is through memes. I'm like, my goodness. But again, right, it's this synchronous ability to identify your core self, and through the core self take the future and bring it to the present for everyone to participate in. And so, yeah, like tearing up at an Avenger film is a part of you seeing your core self on the screen in every capacity,
It's
to
like
know, like,
it's like it's like more real than like real life. It feels to me. I'm like, this is what, like, this feels like life to me when I watch that. I'm like, this is what it's about.
definitely, definitely. Cheryl, thank you so much. How can people get in touch with you and contact you? What are the ways and means that people
So
can find you?
So Final Fantasy 4, right? On Twitter, I'm FF Paladin. If you go to Sherol.org, SHEROL.org, you kind of find some others. So you can find my squirrel channel, like, comment, and subscribe. Yeah, you can read up. I write about machine learning all the time. I try to read papers, like research papers, try to like boil it down, like what I got out of it. I write about spirituality. I actually have it is that deep.com. Like, I went and bought it because I was like, that's so me. Like, so yeah, I got
It
all
is that deep. It is.
that deep.com. Yeah, so Cheryl.org is where you find most of the stuff that I've got going on. The most up to date stuff.
Thank you, Cheryl.
No, definitely. Thank you so much. This has been such a uplifting and inspiring and motivational conversation to have. Thank you for sharing your journey, your process, who you are, sharing it with the audience of the lyrical ones, you being a lyrical one, through all the creative things that you do, and you just being here and being willing to open up to others. Cheryl, thank you so much. Alfluent, any final thoughts or words for the people of episode 109 of the Lyrical Ones podcast?
I just want to say again, thank you to Cheryl. And in the same vein that Cheryl talked about being in charge of your destiny, in the same vein that in the House of M story arc in the X-Men universe, that Wanda creates alternate realities where one where the mutants are in charge of everything, and then another where there are no mutants, that you can have a dichotomous existence and explore those feelings and really explore what it means to be your whole self, and feel those feelings to the point that you understand them and know what's most important to you.
Yeah. No, I thank you guys. I know I didn't know either of you before this, but I felt like we just get each other. Like it's
Yep.
like we've known each other our whole lives. Like I'm talking about things that I'm like, do people know what I'm talking about with the Minesweeper and the Mario and all that? And I just felt like we connected on so many levels. We talked about anime, we talked about all sorts of stuff. So
We talk about jazz, Charlie Parker,
yeah.
Jimi Hendrix,
For real. The history of American music.
Miles Davis,
Yo,
history of music.
if people want to hang out, I'm gonna be at the Jazz Fest. It's at the end of September.
For sure.
Monterey Jazz Festival, and they're gonna do their first ever gospel Sunday morning gospel service ever in the history of the Jazz Fest, and we're gonna have the Morgan State University Choir and the Texas Southern University. Some of the members from Texas Southern University Choir and their jazz bands are gonna be there too. So
For
come check it.
sure.
For sure. For sure. Thank you, Cheryl. As we often do at this time, especially for 109.
One, one, one. Opposition. One, 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 one. Opposition.
Opposition.